Well, hey there. You are listening to another episode of Theology on the Road. My name is Steve Schramm. I'm your host and your chauffeur here for the next few minutes. I want to talk to you about creation conversations. This is something that I am thinking and praying about for the new year, for 2020. And I simply want to take a few minutes to talk about where my head is and also to request prayer, maybe that you would pray for what we're considering doing, and let us know how you think that you can make a contribution. So, a while back, I decided to kind of push the brakes in my ministry activities a little bit in terms of my apologetics and creation teaching. And simply because I was getting more busy in my side business. I'm still that busy and getting busier in my side business, which is a really cool thing. But it does mean that I have a lot going on. And so I made the decision to kind of push on the brakes a little bit, not totally stop, but certainly feel less obligated to produce on a consistent schedule in the way that I have in the past. And as my business grew, there was kind of this inverse kind of correlation going on, where I was having to push more and more brakes on the teaching ministry side of things. And I'm being very careful with my words in there because as I've talked about before, I don't want to contribute to that bifurcation. I do think that the work that I do in my business is ministry as well. But there is a specific teaching aspect to the online ministry work that I do. And so that's how I like to think about that and to differentiate that. So I have been thinking on this, and essentially what it boils down to is, at this point in time, I have two things that are going on a pretty regular basis. One of those is, of course, our Foundations articles on my blog. So I used to do a blog post every week, and I simply don't have the bandwidth, the time to do that right now. There are other priorities, just being truthful, than to produce a weekly blog post. And so what I want to do there is still keep that blog alive and producing meaningful and helpful content for my readers. And so what I am doing is every quarter I am writing a more in-depth piece, and the article series is called Foundations. And this in-depth piece kind of takes a long-form approach to arguing for specific things or talking about a specific kind of discussion, but usually starting in more general terms and arguing down through the specific. So whereas a weekly blog post might focus on one really specific aspect of a topic, the Foundations article might take an angle on a particular topic as a whole, and then actually work through some of the details of that and try to give a more complete picture of the problem and the argument and the response and the breakdown of those things, etc. So I have the Foundations article, and again, if you go to steveschramm.com, I'm actually going to rework the site here in the next couple of days to hopefully better display what articles are Foundations articles, and lead people through where the content that I want them to see in a more efficient way. So I'm probably going to be doing that in the next few days, but for now, you can certainly go and check out the most recent blog posts on there, and you will see the articles very clearly that have been marked as Foundations. And so those are there for you. That's on steveschramm.com. The other thing going on right now is this podcast that you are hopefully listening to. Hopefully I'm not just talking to myself right now. And so this is the Theology on the Road podcast. And again, the reason I started this podcast is because I still wanted to be able to comment generally on matters of, science and philosophy and religion and theology and biblical studies. I wanted to talk about those things in a more broad aspect like I had the opportunity to do on my Steve Schramm Show podcast. But I just didn't have the time, again, to sit in front of a mic for, 30 minutes to an hour each week and do the Steve Schramm Show and really get off of my chest the different things I wanted to talk about. And plus, it was a lot of work. I really do pay attention to quality. I like to put out a quality product. I do wish the sound quality was a little bit better on this podcast. And, working on that. But, for now, this is what we have. And to do it on the other podcast that I had, the Steve Schramm Show, it just took a lot of work. And again, it was one of those things that, of necessity, had to be put on the back burner because I just simply don't have the time for that to be a priority in my life right now, is what it boils down to. So this Theology on the Road podcast was my answer to that. I already have to drive about 45 minutes to and from work every single weekday. And I thought, well, certainly during some of those days, there will be some opportunity that I could just talk and record my thoughts, and maybe somebody would listen along. So that's what this podcast is an attempt at. And so far, it's been, I think, working out well. I've been able to go ahead and reach some people already thus far, and I hope to be able to reach even more with it. But again, this is just something that it's a labor of love. We're putting it out there as we have time to record it. It's really hassle-free. I mean, literally the hardest part is taking the headphones out of my bag. Seriously. It's not that hard to do this because it's published on the Anchor platform, so it's very, very easy. I simply record the podcast. The episodes usually already have a title because I write down my ideas first and put them in as draft episodes in Anchor. So I fire it up, I hit the record button, I go in, and then I have to type a description. So obviously I'm driving, so either I just go ahead and dictate that to Siri, or I wait until I'm parked and type out a very quick description and send it out there, and boom, it's out there to the world. So very, very simple process for this podcast. So I was thinking on this the last few days, though, and doing some reflecting, and I really have gotten greater and greater clarity about my contribution to apologetics and creation science, biblical studies, things of that nature. I've gotten greater and greater clarity about that, and certainly have not arrived, but I'm starting to learn more and more about where my place is in that discussion right now. And, they say that if you want to become, a successful apologist, whatever that means, you should really have a focus on one topic. Be well-rounded, be well-versed, but have a focus on one topic. Well, I kind of do, right? I definitely do. People know me mostly for my take on creation. More specifically, they know me as the guy who's willing to defend young age creationism, but to do so using a very gracious tone toward those who disagree. Really what I work on, and I'm going to talk about this in a future episode, is I have a philosophy of interaction, a model for navigating disagreement with other brothers and sisters that I use, and it's really been helpful for me to be able to have these kinds of discussions and not get heated to the point where we're not talking to each other anymore, and we're talking past each other. Fortunately, I don't have those kind of conversations that are very characteristic in the Origins debate, and for that reason, I have become known and frankly respected among a lot of people who disagree with my take on creationism. And I also think I do have the respect of a lot of people who agree with my take on creationism. So really, I have carved out this niche position for myself that I think is advantageous. And as I was looking at the current teaching offerings that I have in my ministry right now, it was all too obvious that the topic that I'm known for, and my very favorite topic to boot, which is the theology of and the science of creation, was not being given a fair shake in my materials. Now, to this point, I released 2 of those Foundations articles, and one of them was focused on did have a lot to do with science, okay? The other one did not. The one that's coming up in January has nothing to do with science. The Theology on the Road podcast here, we've mentioned it from time to time, certainly, different things about science and about creation. That has most certainly been mentioned, but it's not really been given a feature spot or anything. We've not taken a lot of time to discuss views specific to creation. And so I was thinking about that, and I thought, well, this is something that needs to be addressed, I think. Where could I fit in my schedule in a way that is not a hassle, in a way that works for me right now during this season of life? Where could I fit the consistent teaching of creation in my ministry repertoire? And as I was thinking and praying about that, and I'm still thinking and praying about that, but as I was thinking and praying about that, I came up with the idea for a podcast called Creation Conversations. And what this podcast would do, if the Lord leads me this direction, and I strongly think that He is, but if the Lord leads me in this direction, here is what the vision kind of looks like as of right now. Creation Conversations would be a monthly podcast that simply takes over the feed of the Steve Schramm Show. So if you remember, if you've been a long-time listener of my content, the Steve Schramm Show actually started out in late 2017 as the Creation Academy. So it started out, the first 50 or so, maybe 60 or so episodes were all about creation, science, and theology, and biblical studies, and things like that. And then I changed it to the Steve Schramm Show. We lost quite a bit of listenership. I don't know if people just didn't like that I changed it to my name, if they thought it wasn't going to be about creation anymore, even though the subject matter stayed virtually the same. Anyway, I wanted a platform to talk about things a bit more broadly, so I went with that, and looking back on that was probably not the best decision. It was made hastily, and I probably just should not have done that. Anyway, I did, and so I thought about, in this, I thought about, well, maybe I just go back to the Creation Academy. Maybe I just change the feed name back to the Creation Academy. I start doing more in-depth teaching about creation. The problem with that is, and as much as I enjoyed it, to do that format, and I even kind of anticipate some of the Creation Conversation episodes leaning that direction. Maybe it's me and a co-host who's not necessarily an expert, but just somebody who we share a passion of creation and we want to talk through things. Maybe it's something like that. But anyway, the problem is I'm not an expert, okay, on creation science, or on creation theology, or on creation biblical studies. I am a very passionate fan and follower of those things, and I think that I am able to teach and distill the information down that I learned, but I am not the expert. And as I look around and I talk to people and I get these new experiences, I am seeing people who are like, man, they're just doing the coolest stuff in creation ministry. I'm looking at guys who are just making huge strides in creation ministry right now, and scientists who are making huge discoveries in creation work right now, and theologians who are arguing well for a biblical position on creation that I find very persuasive. That I want to talk to them. I want to get their perspective. And So I want to introduce to the wider audience that I have been able to cultivate. I want to be that buffer. I want to facilitate the dialogue on my podcast and yet have the information from the actual experts who are able to argue for this stuff to come on the show and talk through it. Now, there are some people who, frankly, are just too belligerent, and I'm not even going to invite them on. I will not even extend them an invitation because I don't think they're gracious at all toward the other side. So, I'm not going to do that. But I will have people on who are not going to be afraid to share their views. And this is going to go both ways. One of the things that I'm looking forward to with this is, while the show and myself, of course, already do take an official position and will continue to take an official position on creation, and I'm sure that will need to be reiterated at various appropriate times throughout interviews and things like that. We do take a position here at Steve Strand Ministries, and we'll continue to take that position until we're persuaded otherwise, and I don't think we're going to be. Now, we could be, but I don't think we're going to be. So we're going to continue to take that position, but we are going to have people on of differing perspectives. Some of these friends that I've made who are gracious and are looking for a better dialogue around the origins issue and want to kind of extend an olive branch, so to speak, to their young age creationist brethren. And I have been able to witness, and I've not talked about this with them, etc., and mainly because I don't want to feel like I'm bragging on myself, but personally, I have witnessed in the life of some of these people a complete change in attitude since I have been discussing with them towards young age creationists. Some of the first times that I would see some of their interactions online, they were very hostile towards young age creationists. And since my interactions with them, they're beginning to realize that not everybody is this particular way, and that there might actually be more to this than they originally thought. So I would love to be that buffer, but at the same time, a lot of times creationists misrepresent the views of those guys and people like them, and I want to fix that problem too. So the real thing is I want to fix the origins debate, if I could just say it as bluntly as possible. I don't know that I can do that. That's a pretty big goal, but it's what I want to do. I want to fix the conversation and the dialogue around the origins debate and take it in a completely new direction. That's what I want. And I think that Creation Conversations, a new podcast here from Steve Strand Ministries, I think we can accomplish that. And that's what the goal is going to be. So if the Lord does ultimately lead this direction, which I'm feeling very, very strongly that this is the direction the Lord would have us to go, then starting in 2020, we are going to have at least monthly episodes of Creation Conversations, where we will be talking to experts in different fields of science, philosophy, and biblical studies. These people will be people who argue for the creationist position that we take as the correct one, and people who argue against, so we can better understand their views and talk through some of that with them. Okay? So there will be that. We will have conversations with people who are doing practical creation ministry work. I've become connected with people who are doing some work, who have museums, who own tour guide companies, who work in tour guide companies, etc. And they're doing just really practical work in creation that is really, really interesting. And so I think you'll want to hear about that. People who are maybe not what you would consider in creation ministry, but in a sense they are. Friends like Pat Mingarelli, who actually does have a creation ministry, but a lot of what he does is through photography, creation photography. Or John Chapa, who I've not talked to extensively, but he is a videographer for all these big TV shows, and he is a creationist, 6-day creationist. And man, you should see some of the work that he does. It's just astounding. So guys like that, and ladies and gentlemen who are really making waves in creation from these different fields, these are the kind of people that I want to talk to and expose you to, and including those who would even disagree with us. I want to expose them to these people and vice versa. I want to just foster a better conversation. So be in prayer for that. Creation Conversations, a monthly podcast for now, probably, that features these kind of candid but gracious conversations about science, theology, and the Bible with people who are really concerned about the nature and state of that debate. So be in prayer for that. Creation Conversations 2020. I'm so excited. I think that it is going to just take one more step towards changing the Origins debate for the better and hopefully for the long term. Okay? God bless you. If you have any questions about that, stevestram.com/ask. If you have any questions in general, remember this podcast, Theology on the Road, is not going anywhere. We record episodes occasionally as the Spirit leads and as the inspiration hits while we are on the road, driving to different places. So this is all just about my thoughts, talking through things. So ask. stevestram.com/ask. Ask your questions. Give your perspective if you want to on a particular issue, and I would love to come on here and actually respond to it. I have a couple questions that I need to respond to that are a little bit more in depth, so I need to actually study those things a little bit more before I bring them out to you. But in the meantime, if you have questions, continue to ask them, and that way I can work on answering them right here on the Theology on the Road podcast. All right? God bless you, my friends. I love you. Be looking out for Creation Conversations in 2020. See you later. Bye-bye.